to let everybody know that this meeting is being recorded and it will be archived for future viewing in order for anyone wishing to view at a later stage to view on the council's website. Should anyone have any issues with their technical difficulties today, could you please let us know in the chat box if you've got any audio or camera issues, and or contact Democratic Services. In order for the chairman to be able to manage the meeting, could you please use the raise your hand function if you wish to speak? And can I remind all present that when speaking, you also need to be on camera in line with the Local Government and Elections Act 2021. Thank you. And I'll hand over to the chairman.
Thank you and good morning. And if it's not too late, Happy New Year to you all. And it's good to see Mrs. Hallett with us, who's joined us from Australia. So the wonders of modern science. Good. Are there any apologies for absence? No, none. Thank you. We turn to the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of November 2022. Are you happy to record those as being an accurate account of what happened? I've had a look. I don't think there are any issues for me. I'll take silence as being everybody's in agreement with that. Good. So I'll sign those. Now, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Franks, I think you're putting your hand up.
Yes, I'm taking the precautionary route and declaring an interest in Marianne Cope's application. Just for clarity, I also am a member of the library, and I think I've got dispensation along certain lines. Though I'll take the opportunity to say I do find all these interest declarations quite complicated, and sometimes they're not very helpful. However, I don't want to end up in jail, so I'm going to declare an interest and have a cup of tea at that stage. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, will it be necessary for him to leave at that stage? Debbie, do you want to help us on that?
I think based on what Councillor Franks has said, that he will be leaving the meeting at that stage.
Fine, thanks very much. Okay. Right, we'll go to the reports of the monitoring officer, item 4, and applications for dispensation. Debbie, do you want to lead us into the first one there, which is by Marianne Cope?
Yeah. Before Councillor Franks leaves us, if I just give a slight overview and see whether the chair agrees with this approach. I understand a late application came in and was sent out on the 24th of January relating to an application from Councillor Susan Lloyd-Selby. So that is in effect an item 9 matter, but if the chair wishes, we can deal with it under item 4.
Yes, so I agree to that.
Bit of housekeeping. With regards to Marianne Cope's matter, there is a matter which I will cover off and probably repeat it for the benefit of Councillor Franks when he comes back in, or indeed my colleague Karen Bowen can pick it up with Councillor Franks later. But this would be a good time for Councillor Franks to leave the meeting.
Lovely to see you all. See you later.
Thank you. Well, yes, right.
Okay,
yes.
So with regards to this application, there are, there's particularly one amendment to be made to the application before you. So the nature of the dispensation sought is to speak and vote on library matters at meetings of the Vale of Glamorgan full council. Now, Councillor Cope has clarified that she wants to remove the word full, and indeed the application is relating to all meetings of the council, which is consistent to applications that you've received before, so be that scrutiny or a committee. So it's a broad application. Now it's an application to speak and vote. And you'll note that Councillor Cow prefers the fact that she's a trustee of the Dinas Powys Library and Activity Centre. When we've had these types of applications before us, we also consider whether ground H applies, and there is a qualification with ground H, so I will come on to that. But just dealing with initially with the paragraphs that Councillor Cowper has referred to in her application. So they're at the bottom of the first page of the application, D, E and F. I think, albeit D and F are applicable, I think it would be difficult to be able to justify that it's an interest that's common to the member and a significant proportion of the general public. So I think that's one that if you are minded to grant it, it wouldn't be in line with ground E of the circumstances under the regs. But I will give a mention to ground H, and just to remind members, the grounds, the circumstances are appended to the report, and ground H deals with if the business relates to the finances or property of the voluntary organisation of which the member is on the management committee. Well, we're aware that Councillor Cowper is a trustee, and the member has no other interest in that business, provided that any dispensation shall not extend to participation in any vote. So it's a speak-only ground. Now, the reason I'm pleased that we're dealing under this item with Councillor Susan Lloyd-Selby's application is because she has split this ground H, and she is asking for dispensation to speak on and vote in effect on all matters other than matters relating to finance or property. And I flag that up, and it's the point that will be followed up with Councillor Franks later, because I know he's previously put in an application where his application has been restricted to speak only because of ground H, without then looking at, well, is there a possibility that any business coming before the council would be dealing with matters other than property and finance? I appreciate it's quite convoluted, but you know, if members do want further clarification, more than happy to do so. So in summary, what I'd be recommending to committee is that if you are minded to grant the application, which is consistent with previous applications which you've granted, that it should be only to speak if the matters relate to finance or property, and then for you to consider whether you're happy to grant the application to speak and vote on all other matters, save for finance and property. I'm hoping that makes sense, but happy to run through that if you need further clarification.
Chair, before we go any further, I'd just like to say that Councillor Franks' connection is still online. He's obviously not there from what I can see, but I can't actually confirm that. So I would suggest that we probably have 2 minutes adjournment so that I can actually try and contact Councillor Franks, because he really needs to be off the screen and out of the meeting before we make a decision. Debbie, are you happy with that suggestion?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Right. So we'll have a short break.
I'll try and get hold of him as soon as I can.
Thanks.
Thanks.
can't just get rid of him.
I've removed him from the meeting. Actually, Chair, what I've done is I've actually removed Councillor Franks from the meeting, and I'll ask him to rejoin. I think that would be a better approach, and then you can carry on. Thank you.
Okay, if we're happy with that. Are there any questions for Debbie? I won't test you if you understand it all, but just if you... I have to say, it is a bit of a gauntlet for, when it is a library, and I can't see that the councillors benefit from it, but we're playing it strictly by the rules, so that's fine. In that event, are we happy to accept Debbie's recommendation?
Yeah, so to be clear, so it's to speak only on matters relating to finance and property, but on all other matters to speak and vote in line with D and F.
Good.
Thank
Everybody seems to be nodding. Councillor Mr. Alexander, I can't see you, but I assume you're all happy with it.
And Chair, what I will do, as we have dealt with applications previously under ground H, and the applications have been presented in that vein to speak only. That particular point about hiving off the finance and property matters will be flagged up with those relevant applicants should they wish to resubmit. I think that would be fair.
Okay, thank you. Well, perhaps we can deal with the late application from Councillor Susan Lloyd-Selby at this stage, because that's similar then, is it, Debbie?
It is.
Yes. Do you want to give us your recommendation on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether Councillor Franks is back in the meeting.
Yes, Debbie, I've just asked him to rejoin and he's come back online. Can we just hear that you are there, Councillor Franks, to be sure, please?
Hello.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Can
I also check before we go on? Mr. Watkins, your camera isn't on. Is there a problem with your camera today, just in case you need to speak later on in the meeting?
Well, I can't see why, because the strip on the top seems to suggest my camera is on.
Okay. You know, outside of your laptop, at the very top, there's a slider. At the very top, there's a little black slider. Can you try and move that?
It's the slider.
Right at the very top on the outside. If you run your finger along the very top, you'll feel a bump, and that's the slider. If you move that. Can you see what I mean?
It went wrong.
On the outside of your laptop. On the outside.
On the top.
On the very top of your laptop. If you move your finger right across the very top of the laptop, you'll feel a bump in between.
Yes, in the middle.
Yeah, can you move that slider, see if that is what the problem is?
Is that better?
That's it. That's exactly what it is. It's the slider.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, everybody.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well done. Right. So the application by Councillor Lloyd-Selby.
Yes, so it's an application to speak and vote on all matters save for matters relating to finance or property. So ground H relates to the finance and property, D and F to the application to speak and vote on all other matters. And so in line with the circumstances, D refers to that it wouldn't damage public confidence, she'd be involved in those discussions, and F, the participation of the member is justified by a particular role or expertise, and the details as per the application are that she's a trustee of the Vale Food Bank, which has received funding from the council.
So everybody happy with that?
Yes.
Who's nodding? Agreeing? No, no. So we'll accept that recommendation there. Thank you very much. Now going back to the original agenda, we've got Councillor Stephen Haynes, right to vote and speak on matters regarding finance and other matters regarding rented allotments. He has a council allotment on Roos Road allotments. Debbie, any issues there?
The only point that I'd raise is the application, having clarified it is until the next local government elections. He is saying on the application it's a request for dispensation on all meetings, but yes, until the next local government elections. Ground E, I don't think that can be justified because certainly a significant proportion of the general public wouldn't necessarily have an allotment. Obviously for members to consider whether the right to speak and vote should be on all matters save for matters of finance. But my recollection, Karen, and I know that you have the previous decisions before you of the committee. My understanding is these applications have previously been granted to speak and vote.
Okay, everybody happy with that? Yes? No comments? Good, that will be granted then. Thank you very much. I think that deals with the applications. We'll move on to item 5, observations by independent members of Town and Community Council Committee meetings. Have any of the independent members been? Yes, Mr. Watkins.
Yes. I attended a meeting of the Llanfair Community Council on the 1st of December last year. It was a very short meeting. It lasted some 50 minutes. The agenda was uncontroversial, so I'm not really in a position to form a view as to how the council conducts its business. I can talk about the venue. The venue was St. Hilary Village Hall. It's a very spacious room. Access is easy. Everybody could be seen and heard clearly. There was enough room for members of the public who, should they choose to attend, members had place cards in front of them. So from the point of view of the venue, everything was fine. But as far as the conduct of the meeting was concerned, it was just too short and uncontroversial. I couldn't form a view.
Well, thank you. There's no problems. That's good. Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Alexander.
Thank you. I do hope that you can hear me clearly.
Yes.
Just to say that I've had the pleasure of attending 3 meetings. One of Lantwood Major Town Council on the 24th of the 11th, 22. I thought this was an excellent meeting. There was a substantial agenda chaired by the town mayor. There was I attended remotely. Everyone else was there in terms of physical presence. The meeting was extremely well conducted. The agenda was substantial. There was an opportunity for public question time, although no members of the public were present. And I would like to pay tribute to the administrative procedures which backed up the meeting. The various subcommittees of the town council reported, and each of those had reports in a different colour of paper. For instance, for finance, it was blue. For planning, it was purple. For recreation and open spaces, it was yellow. So the whole process by which the meeting was conducted from an administrative procedure, I think, was really excellent, and I commend the way in which that was arranged and organised. In terms of my next attendance, that was at Pendoylan. that was a hybrid meeting. And I think of all the meetings that I've attended thus far, for me, this was the most enjoyable. And I know I'm not there to enjoy myself, but I think it's probably helpful if I do. There was a real sense of community spirit and wanting to do their best for the community. There was no slot for public speaking. That was a hybrid meeting. And again, I attended remotely. And the only observations that I would make is because it was a hybrid meeting, there was obviously no provision for nameplates. And there was a slight irritation in that someone appeared to have a TV or radio at quite a loud volume in the background. And I was surprised that the chair didn't attempt to address that, because it did cause an element of disruption to the process of the meeting. But otherwise, I thought it was a lovely, friendly meeting and organisationally very well conducted. And then on the 18th of the 1st, I attended a meeting at Clonmais. I attended by Zoom. I couldn't, that was a physical meeting for everyone else apart from the Vale of Glamorgan councillor, who also attended by Zoom. I couldn't see that there were nameplates. There was a very clear protocol for public speaking. I've not seen one set out in quite such a clear way before. And there was a slight tendency for members of the Community Council to stray from the agenda, but the chairman quickly brought them back to the main purpose of the meeting. So again, a well-conducted meeting. And I think at that I will pause. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lorna, have you been to anywhere?
I have. So I've been to a meeting of, let me just check I've got the right ones now, of Barry Town Council. It was very well run. It's a very large agenda. I'm just reminding myself because it was back in December. It was interesting for a number of points. The first thing was when they spoke, they stood, which I thought was quite fascinating and really helpful when you were joining via Zoom, because you could identify them really easily. But there was a very interesting agenda item raised where they had a subcommittee, and because they all had an interest who were sitting on the subcommittee, that subcommittee could not make a recommendation or a decision because they all had a prejudicial interest. So they redrew the terms of reference to enable that committee to give advice to the main committee, which meant the committee could function, they could make a recommendation, and the decision making was taken away from them because they couldn't do it anyway, and given back to the main committee. And I thought very pragmatic, very sensible, very well run meeting.
Good. Councillor Franks, yes.
Could I just mention, I am a member of a community council, but I don't think I need to declare an interest, as it's such a general interest. That being the case, I am looking at Debbie. I refer to Gerwyn's comment about a meeting being too short and controversial. Well, to my mind, that's a dream meeting. So don't be too upset about that.
Okay, thank you for that. Pat, have you been able to?
No, I haven't done anything, Richard, I'm afraid, but I've got 3 coming up at the beginning of April.
Excellent, good. Well, I went on the 17th of January. Well, no, I didn't go. I attended remotely via Zoom the Surrey and Lavernock Community Council meeting. That also was fairly short because the end of part 1 was at 7:30. It was an uncontroversial meeting, which it was a bit like the one Gerwyn went to. But I echo what Councillor Frank says. That's good. If it's going well, that's fine. It was very well ordered. An issue which I've mentioned before: personal interests were mentioned, but not their nature. So people will say, "Yes, I've got a personal interest, wasn't prejudicial. But as a member of the public, I didn't know what it was. It was quite interesting that the clerk took a very, very active part in the meeting and effectively ran it. And he did very well. But my note is that there should be some consideration of the respective roles of the chairman and clerk. I mean, the chairman really didn't do much as a chairman. But having said that, it was a much better meeting than previously I'd attended, which was probably a couple of years ago. And as a general trend, I think today has been, the reports have been very positive, and I don't know if it's possibly accidental because we're attending, but it does seem that the various town and community councils are certainly improving, that there's less cause for concern. So long may that continue. Any comments on that or anything else before we move on? No, so we'll, Karen, you'll let us know what we've got to complete by the end of this financial year, and we'll go from there. I thought it was useful when I asked for a list, I could put in order which ones to go to, so we had an indication. Lorna, sorry.
Sorry, Richard, your sound keeps on dropping out. It just dropped out then again.
Beg your pardon, is it on the speaker?
I can't see it. I think you might have lost your actual, it's the speaker part. Yes, that's what it is underneath. Yeah.
Is that better?
That is, thank you.
Good, okay.
Chair, I just wanted to mention, you mentioned about the list, the schedule list for Town and Community Council visits. Just to say that members have been given a list. There are a few that we haven't allocated as yet, but we will be looking at those, over the next few months.
Okay, thank you very much. Good. Update on the National Standards Committee Forum. I think this is a day too early, but Debbie will explain.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is just an updating report, just advising that the date for the first meeting, which was due to be early December, was put back because of the problems with the availability of attendees to tomorrow. So that's the inaugural meeting of the All Wales National Standards Committee Forum. So attached to the report for information is a copy of the agenda. That's Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, the terms of reference, and a broad overview of the makeup and arrangements relating to that forum. Just to highlight, as you'll appreciate, the role of the forum is to share information, share good practice, have debate, and formulate best practice. But any decisions will be made by Standards Committee, so there are no delegated powers which are being transferred to the forum. So in effect, a best practice forum, which will be welcomed. The one point I wanted to highlight, because there has been an exchange of emails between monitoring officers, so it may or may not come up at tomorrow's meeting, but there is very much a drive to try and achieve harmonisation on the thresholds for gifts and hospitality across Wales. Now, this is something you might recall was raised in the Richard Penn report. Richard Penn having been commissioned by Welsh Government to consider any changes to the ethical framework. And indeed, we're having an update on the Penn report at tomorrow's meeting. So within the Richard Penn report, there were a number of areas where he was identifying areas for consideration, and certainly Welsh Government have indicated that if there's any opportunity by consensus to implement some of those changes, that would be their preferred option. It's a faster way of dealing with those matters. So it may come up tomorrow, or it may come up at a future meeting. But as I say, there has been an exchange of emails concerning harmonisation of thresholds. So in agenda, paragraphs 211, 212, I've picked up this particular point. I've also referred to the thresholds in the Vale that we work to. So the current thresholds are for gifts, £50, so anything over that, and also hospitality, £25. We also have another measure in place in the Vale, as do a number of other authorities in Wales, that if a member is receiving gifts from a single source during a financial year of a value up to £100, gifts or hospitality, so it could be below that £25 or £50 threshold, but the cumulative effect is £100 or more in any year from a single source, they're also declared. So that is something that I've also flagged up with the exchange with my colleagues, that to be mindful of that additional strand to the measures that a number of us have in place. Agenda item 2, recommendation 2 is to seek the committee's view, as referred to in paragraphs 211, 212, of harmonisation for both gifts and hospitality of £25. So I'm in support of that. I would recommend that is something for the committee to recommend. It's reducing the threshold rather than extending it, but also with a view of incorporating that £100 threshold that I referred to. So it'd be useful to have views. As I say, the forum will not be in a position, if indeed they are putting it on the agenda, to make a decision on that. It would need to come back and then go on to cabinet, but it would be useful to have a sounding from this committee on that particular matter.
Thank you, Debbie. So effectively, the suggestion from Richard Penn is that £25 for both gifts and hospitality. We are £25 for hospitality, so we wouldn't have to move, but the £50 for gifts would be reduced to £25. Any views on that? The councillors, do you want to, Councillor Birch, do you have a view? I mean, would you have any objection to it coming back down to 25 then?
No, none at all. No one's ever offered me anything, so I'm quite happy for it to be 25. What interests me, though, is the absolute detail that we're going into at this level, and you think, I don't understand why this doesn't, and this is irrelevant, but why this doesn't apply to all levels of political governance. And just, you know, it's fascinating, isn't it?
I think what Debbie raised it with me, I think Merthyr is sort of £5 or nil or something, you know.
Really?
I think they're very low.
Right.
There we are. Councillor Franks, do you have a view?
Well, I'm in the same boat as Rhiannon. I've never been offered anything, I'm glad to say. And on a serious note, when I meet with people, I usually meet in a cafe or something like that, and I'm always a lot more comfortable if I buy the tea and cakes rather than the other way around. It's only a few quid, but I feel it's just something I do. Something I do. I can see I can see if a councillor is a cabinet member or something like that. They're invited for a meal with someone to discuss something. Whether that would be appropriate, only Debbie would advise, I think. But again, I've never been in that position, so I take the precautionary principle. Not only buy your own cup of tea, but treat your constituent as well.
Thank you. Councillor Charles, do you have any view?
Yes, as mayor, I was given quite a few gifts, but nothing to the value of £25. I would say up to about £5, pens, notebooks, badges. Yeah, so I have no problem with it, £25.
Good.
No, sorry, could I just come back in there, please, Richard?
Yes.
I'm just thinking that actually, I don't know whether we need guidance. Councillors need guidance on this, and I know that both Chris and Janice are experienced councillors. I think most of us go out of our way to make sure we're not in a situation where we're under any obligation to constituents or people who wish to canvass our opinions or whatever. I mean, Chris was talking about accepting meals. I would not do that, absolutely not, and I'm sure the rest of us wouldn't, unless it was an official function or whatever, because you simply don't want to be in a position where somebody could then say to you, you have had, hospitality at my expense or whatever. So I think most of us are very careful, but I will say that we have new councillors, and perhaps that guidance needs to be made clearer to them. I'm sure it was in the training. But I might have blinked and missed that. So I think that would be something that could be reinforced for newer councillors.
But it could be something like an invitation to a football match or a rugby match or the theatre or something. Debbie, yes.
Yeah, it was just to flag up that there is that provision in the Members' Code of Conduct that regardless of what your threshold is, if it would or would give the appearance of putting you under an obligation, that should be refused. So it's where there's a gift hospitality with no strings attached. That's where the £25 and 50, or as we may be heading towards the £25 threshold applies. And as Councillor Birch mentioned, yes, it was covered off in the Members' Code of Conduct training, but I take the point with regards to refreshers on that.
Good. Subject to anybody else having anything else to say, I don't think there is. So the view of this committee is that we'd have no objection to it being reduced, the gifts being reduced to £25 and the hospitality remaining at 25. Thank you for that. So that meeting is tomorrow. Debbie and I'll be attending that by Zoom, and we'll report at the next meeting. Thank you. Item 7, appointment of a standards committee panel. Debbie, would you like to lead us on that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I've attached to this report the link of the question and answer that was provided at Council on the 5th of December when the issue of establishing an inquiry was raised. So members have access to that. To highlight paragraph 2.1, I'm just clarifying there, as indeed I have done with the relevant member and group leader, that inquiries are established by a government minister or otherwise by an act of Parliament. So it's not in our gift to establish an inquiry. Also, just for members' attention, what I have highlighted, because there has been a meeting, as I referred to in the body of the report in paragraph 1.2, I have highlighted, just so that you have assurance on this, that any concerns of potential criminal nature must be referred to the police.
And I've obtained from the police the details of the officer in charge, and I've provided the details, contact details, telephone number, secure email address, so that has been provided. And as I say, that's if there is a concern. An individual doesn't need to be an expert in those areas of criminal law. If there is that concern, the information is to be shared on any potential criminal offence. I've also spoken with a member about the arrangements that we have in place with regards to the Members' Code of Conduct, and indeed the requirements under the code, which have come into place. I think when the offences arose, the Members' Code of Conduct wasn't in place, certainly not the model code of conduct as we work to now, but we do indeed have the Members' Code of Conduct with provisions whereby if a member is of the belief that another member has breached or potentially breached the Members' Code of Conduct, there's an obligation for that to be reported. So there is that safeguard, and indeed also in the wider context, we do have a whistleblowing policy, which is important, particularly for officers. There are concerns with officers, so there are a number of measures in place. Concerns have not been raised prior to the points being raised on the 5th of December of this nature. So as monitoring officer, I haven't been contacted, but indeed, obviously, we're bring the report today so that you can have regard to whether this matter is taken forward, and indeed, as is set out in the report, the merits of a panel of independent members to consider this matter and consider terms of reference. And given the sensitivities, given the concerns raised, or the point raised regarding officers and indeed members of the council. So I'll hand over to the chair, but happy to take any other questions.
Thank you. We have to be careful. This is not an easy subject. Has the time for appeal elapsed, do you know, Debbie, in this case?
Appeal against convictions, 28 days from the 25th of November, so that timescale has lapsed. My understanding is my office are in contact with the court that as of yesterday, there wasn't an appeal, or certainly not an appeal on their system. There's also a right of appeal against sentencing, and of course sentencing was on the 19th of December, and again it's a 28-day window there. Similarly, the advice from the court was nothing on their system, so I have asked officers to just carry out a further check, touching base with the court next week. But rightly so, Chair, very sensitive matters, and we need to be mindful of the council's legal position on this matter, and indeed the rights of the individuals. I appreciate this is not dealing with the member who was the subject of the proceedings. It does relate to other officers and what other officers or members knew, but just a note of caution, I would say.
Thank you. Well, the recommendations are that the Standards Committee considers the contents of this report and whether to set up a panel of independent members of the Standards Committee to consider conducting a review in respect of the matter referred to in paragraph 1.1 of this report. Does anybody have any views on that? Want to comment? Mrs. Tinsley?
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Thank you, Debbie, for the clarification on the process for inquiries and for the reminder about the processes we currently have at our disposal, including the whistleblowing and, of course, the code of conduct. I would want some reassurance that the panel was going to consider the wider issues, and I anticipate this would be developed with the terms of reference. But for me, I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't want this panel to be almost a pretend inquiry. I want it to very much focus on the wider issues of the trust that we have that our current processes would enable any allegations that were there or rumours that were circulating to be dealt with, and that people trusted that if they were brought to the surface, that those would be dealt with appropriately.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Mr. Watkins.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. As I see it, it's not suggested that this defendant used his position as a councillor to perpetrate any offending. It's not suggested that any offending took place on council property. And this committee, or this committee would have no power to examine the conduct of officers of the council. It would have no power, as I see it, to examine the conduct of former councillors. So I just don't see where this is going. I don't see that it's possible to conduct a review of the sort that Councillor Hooper is suggesting.
I think that might be a fair point, and it may be that the panel, when set up, says, well, there's nothing much we can do about it. It is historic, but we could check the present position. This item was raised by Councillor Hooper, and I mean, I think I made the comment at the time. There are various options, one of which is to do nothing, and I felt that wasn't right, if I put it that way. Quite what we can do is a different matter. And that's why at this stage, what is envisaged is that we have this small panel to see if there is actually anything we can do. So that's where it's come from. I mean, I entirely agree with you. You know, we don't want to reinvestigate this, and as you say, it didn't, as I understand it, any allegations. Nothing to do with the council as such, and I don't know quite what can be done, but there we are. That's for something to. That's why the panel, the terms of reference are important. Yes, Mrs. Hallett, you had your hand up. You're on mute at the moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. I looked up a report that was prepared by Janet Smith. She was called in by the BBC to review the outcome of the Savile affair. And the basics of all that was looking at the policies that were in place, that they were robust enough to be able to address. But they were looking at the organisation, which, unlike the council, was coming under question. So what the recommendations, and one of them was that they looked at the rules and procedures regarding the protection of young people and how you deal with whistleblowing. And I think, and I feel that we've got very robust systems in that respect. But I think that's something, if you're going to form a team or a committee, I think that's something would form part of the committee's terms of reference. It's a report which was produced in 2016 by Janet Smith. Yes, Dame Janet Smith. I found it very informative. It's not terribly long, it's just a report, but they were looking at the systems within the organisation, the culture of the organisation, and giving people the ability and the comfort to actually say what they feel is going on. I think we're well on our way with the culture, and I'm sure our policies are well and truly in line, but maybe something we would want to pick up on.
Okay, thank you. Can I say the idea of having independent members on it was to keep it very independent and not to have party politics entering into the scene, because if we have one political group on, perhaps it's got to be balanced with another group, and in proportion in the end we'd have the whole committee considering it, which I don't think is appropriate. Mr. Alexander.
Thanks. I just want to offer a very quick observation and say I think there's merit in forming a panel to see if there is any useful work that such a panel can do. And if there isn't, then the process can be wound up fairly quickly. But I think the principle of establishing a panel to look at its locus is a sound one. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll put it to you that are you in agreement to a panel of 3 independent members being set up? All those in favour? Yep, I think most people. Anybody against it? No. Garwin is against. Right. Thank you. Mrs. Hallett, are you against it, or you want to speak?
Yeah, I think I agree with Gary. I'm not sure if there is a need to actually form a committee in this respect.
Okay. Councillor Birch, were you wanting to say anything?
No, it wasn't that I was wanting to say anything, but what I was going to say that, I mean, obviously I completely agree that it should be outside the political process. I think that that's laudable, but also that a committee, if it looked at all the processes and reassured itself that those were, as Mrs. Hallett has said, were robust and comprehensive, and then you could just leave the committee on the back burner to be there should it ever be needed in the future. But you've looked at all the processes, reassured yourselves that they're in place and they're appropriate, and then, you can leave it on the back burner.
Okay, thank you. Well, Debbie, I think we're just about in favour of there being a panel. How do you suggest that the 3 are appointed?
It would be very helpful if we could do that today, but otherwise, if we can't have all 3 independent members identified today, if committee gave me a delegated power so that I could liaise in consultation with yourself, Chair, to identify, appoint the 3 members of the panel. But it would be helpful if we could have some indication today, if that's possible.
Well, let me put it in this way: are any independent members not interested in going on it, or Mr. Watkins, are you happy to go on it, even though you don't think it's a good idea?
The difficulty now is that I've made my view clear.
Well, yeah.
So it could be said that I'm prejudiced.
Okay.
Richard, I'm not sure if I'll be around because I'm in Australia until the middle of March.
Right. Okay. Well, I'd be happy if you're happy for me to do it, to be on the committee, bearing in mind that I have met the councillor. I'm prepared to do it. I'd be grateful if Lorna, you would be prepared to go on the council, go on this sub panel. In view of what you say, Gerwin, Mr. Alexander, Ronnie, are you happy to go on it?
Yes, entirely happy so to do.
Right. So we've got Lorna, Ronnie, and myself, Debbie.
Thank you. Thank
Good.
you.
Okay.
And then the final recommendation is obviously that the panel to consider the terms of reference and then obviously to report back, yes, ideally to the next standards committee.
Yeah. Well, we'll see where we've got to by that stage, if anywhere. Good. Thank you for that. We move on to correspondence with the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales. Debbie?
Yes, I have 2 matters to report, or matters that I've mentioned previously that working through the process. Given the nature of the matters and the stage they're at, they are confidential, so I will deal with those under part 2.
Thank you. We've dealt with one item that I was brought to our attention that was urgent. Are there any more?
No, Chair.
No. Fine. Good. Well, that concludes part 1 of the meeting. Thank you for that. Shall we move to part 2?